So glad that you could be here this evening. I'm Kevin Brown, one of the Associate Conference Ministers in the Minnesota Conference and co-moderator for the Network of Wider Church Youth Ministries. We are delighted that so many people are interested in having what we hope is a first conversation about confirmation. As we were planning this evening, wanted to make sure that we introduced a couple of things into the space. Often confirmation conversations begin with the kind of what kind of curricula is available, what are the resourcings, how do you structure confirmation? And we wanted to make sure that we also invited people to consider the why of confirmation. Over the past several years in a number of spaces, I have had conversations with folk who've been saying things that I boil down to a phrase that confirmation in the United Church of Christ and in many other contexts is often a rite in search of new meaning. That it is one of those things that is not so easily tied to things like church membership or other aspects of kind of youth-focused development that it once was. And so there's less clarity within many of our local congregations about kind of the why we continue to do this and how can confirmation continue to be a relevant opportunity within the faith journey and development for young people. So I hope that we're able to begin to widen the conversation a bit, to develop new understanding with one another about how is it that we invite local congregations and collections of other folk across the denomination to begin asking the questions of how and why do we continue to do this important piece, because so many people still name it as important within our local contexts. How can we begin to envision this and enliven this as a way of helping invite folks, whether that is young people or intergenerational groups or adult groups engaged in confirmation, into greater belonging, into ways of discerning their own gifts within the broad community and how to use that, with ways of connecting the ancient stories of our tradition and the stories of these kind of lived faith within particular places to individual stories of faith. So I hope that this is just the first conversation of many to come as we kind of dream together and help support one another in this broader conversation about this evolving and emerging understanding of this ancient rite of confirmation. I want to open us with a prayer. I'm going to invite us in just a moment to hear and share together the words of Carrie Waylander, one of our kind of partners and kindred spirits from the United Church of Canada. But I'll invite everybody to take just a moment and settle in. Ground yourself, if that means planting your feet. Take a moment to fully arrive in this space by perhaps taking a deep shared breath together. And hear these words from Carrie Waylander, her prayer for beginners. Unfamiliar seas again. There's been a shift in the wind. We wrap ourselves in chaos and possibility and attend to this unexpected course. We prefer being experts and the skill that familiarity brings, yet something continually stirs and surprises us. We are always beginners. So let us go with curiosity and courage With vision and vigor, let us journey beyond these opening doors, ready to learn and learn again, ready to embark and embark again, ready to trust and trust again in the one who has loved us in every beginning. Amen. May these words guide us into this conversation as we kind of begin our new course as beginners, learning from one another in this space. Welcome. Shan, who are we going to next?
Yep. Thank you so much, Kevin. Our panelists are each going to introduce themselves. They're going to say who they are, and then they each have a specific topic that they're going to talk for about 2 to 3 minutes to just get our juices flowing and learning from being open, right, to these new beginnings. So we're going to start with Debbie. So let me pin Debbie.
Okay, I timed this earlier. It's 3 minutes and 5 seconds. Will that be all right?
Perfect.
All right. So I'm Rev Debbie Gline Allen, Minister of Faith Formation for the Southern New England Conference. And I've been wrestling with our confused and confusing rite of confirmation for about 35 years. And I still haven't come across an answer or a model that I feel is truly faithful to our youth and our churches and to Christianity in general. So I'm really glad that we're having this conversation, and I'm looking forward to the breakout rooms when we can really hash this out. But this evening I've been asked to speak about intergenerational and congregational confirmation, and I want to share with you what I've been learning this year based on a program that I've been asked to lead in my home congregation, where I'm just a member. We have one teen who is a freshman in high school, whose mother insisted, and she's that kind of mom, that we confirm her daughter this year. And this actually, it turned out to be really good news for me, because I've had this idea percolating for a whole church confirmation program that basically surrounds the confirmands in what we're calling at this church a circle of blessing. And so the pastor, the Christian educator, the CE committee, and I met to brainstorm the desired outcomes for both Abby, our confirmand, and for the congregation. And I started by sharing with them the traditional goals of the church for confirmation that have been in existence for a while and may or may not be helpful for different congregations. Of course, an affirmation of one's baptismal vows, to become a member of that church, a rite of passage into adulthood, an introduction to the Christian church in all of the settings in the denomination, with side trips to other religions and faiths, a mentoring program. Back in my day, a prerequisite for taking communion. I imagine some churches still hold on to that. A focus on the academics of Christianity, the Bible, church history, etc. And I like to snarkily say what the confirmands should have learned in Sunday school up to that point. And lastly, I shared with them an implicit goal that seems to be met with just about every confirmation program out there: a graduation from church school and ultimately the church. So of these traditional goals, we decided to definitely include the affirmation of baptismal vows, to offer church membership as an option, and to provide our confirmand with the information and experiences that would prepare her for not just making the decision, but for this next phase in her young adulthood, in the church, in her faith, and so on. But we also added two more. One is to provide opportunities, experiences to help her get to know several members of the congregation, in congregation's leadership better, not just one. and as also to as we do intergenerational learning opportunities and other experiences in the life of our congregation. And then the other one is to emphasize over and over again that she is a beloved child of God, through words, through the support by our community of faith, and helping her understand that she truly does belong. We're not just saying those words. So we began last fall with a commitment Sunday, where the confirmand and the congregation shared a litany of commitment that lined out the promises that help us in our circle of blessing concept. We hold 2 classes a month after worship with me and her mentor. And on the Sundays that we hold the class, the pastor uses our class theme and scripture in worship and reminds the congregation that Abby is taking a deeper dive after worship into the subject. We're fortunate that she's in a family that has brought their kids to corporate worship since they were very small. So we haven't had to fight to get her in worship. It just happens. Yes. Some of our classes are open to the congregation. We recently had a walk through the church year, which was just totally intergenerational, a lot of fun. And we've got a romp through the Old Testament scheduled, where we're going to do some miming together as a group. Our field trips are open to the entire congregation. A national tour of Jesus Christ Superstar is coming this Lent into our neighborhood. Because we are in southern New Hampshire, we're going to take a trip to Salem, Massachusetts for what I'm calling a Puritans versus Witches pilgrimage tour. And then Old South Church in Boston has jazz worship on Thursday nights, so we're going to try to do that in the summer, so that everybody can take advantage of that, not just confirmation class. We're only about halfway through our year. We started on Reformation Sunday. We chose that partly because we just weren't ready any earlier, and partly because the model we know today was pretty much created by Martin Luther. That's what I read somewhere. But by next October, it's my hope that Abby will have come to know our congregation in a more mature way, developmentally appropriate for where she is now, that she will have had the information and experiences she needs to make an authentic decision about joining our church in the Church Universal or not, that she will know a few more adults from the church so that she can feel comfortable going to them with any questions or issues she has that she'd prefer not to go to her parents with, and that she'll find a calling within our church congregation's life that feeds both her and the congregation. And of course, the big one, that she truly knows herself to be a beloved child of God. The end. 3 minutes.
Thank you, Debbie. I am going to pin our next presenter, Reverend Kelsey Beebe, and let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Kelsey, and I am the Minister for Faith in Motion, an embodied ministry, where I spend a lot of time talking about how do we take our faith from just thinking about it to how do we embody it, how do we live it out in our lives. And that's how I have designed confirmation curriculum that I've created. So I was a pastor of 2 local churches in Wisconsin and led confirmation a few times for them. This is Gabriel and this is Samuel. My husband's on his way. We got our time zones confused. But with this confirmation program, my mentors that we had mentoring our youth liked it so much they said, "Hey, can you adapt this and do it for adults?" So I saw that Jen put my website in the chat. I do have a curriculum on my website, and that's what I used for adult confirmation, but it was adapted originally from the youth one. And my goal for that curriculum was to help youth figure out, what does our faith have to do with our everyday lives? Like, why does it matter? Why is it important? I call it dusting off the pages of scripture. What does this have to do with who we are as people? How can this affect like my friendships and school? Like, what does this have to do with who I am outside of an hour on Sunday morning? And sorry, it's a little bit of chaos here. I received quite a bit of pushback from my folks in Wisconsin who said, why aren't they, memorizing the 10 Commandments and, all these different things. And I said, well, we talk about the 10 Commandments, but they don't need to memorize them, because how does that serve them? Like, do you still have them memorized? And most of them said no. So why are we expecting our 8th graders to do it? So really it's about, why does this matter? How does it apply? How does it help me live my life in a way that we say is Christian, and that's, I would say, one of the pieces of pushback we get from a lot of youth is these Christians don't seem very Christian. And so what does it actually mean? And we also talk about, what does it mean to be a member of the church? And the curriculum I have for youth, one of the things they're required to do is work with their mentor to think about what their gifts are and how they can use those gifts to serve the church. And so they do a service project before the end of confirmation. So yeah, that's, I think, one of the ways to approach curriculum is less about memorization, less about, sorry, I set a timer for myself so I wouldn't go over. But less about memorizing things and more about experiencing God, experiencing their faith, and talking to adults about how does their faith impact their lives, and and giving them space to ask hard questions. So at the end of every session, there's a question box, and they get to anonymously write a question. And at the next session, I answer them no matter what they ask. So I think it creates space for them to explore and challenge things and ask hard questions. All right, I'm going to mute myself. That's my spiel.
Thank you so much to the Peterson Beebe family joining us tonight. Much appreciated. Again, I did put the link to Kelsey's website and the confirmation curriculum that she has written in the chat. And now I am going to add our third presenter as a pin. And oops, let me find you. There you are. Jonathan.
Alrighty. Hello, everybody. I hope everybody is having a good evening. My name is Jonathan Bradner. I am the Youth Ministry Network leader for the Heartland Conference, which is Ohio, Northern Kentucky, and one congregation in West Virginia. And so we're doing a lot of exploratory stuff because we really didn't have a Youth Ministries Network before I was sort of tagged in. I'm also pastor of Emmanuel United Church of Christ here in St. Bernard, Ohio. There's actually a consistory meeting happening right now, so thanks for letting me get out of that. But I also I grew up with confirmation camp, and my dad was a confirmation camp counselor for like 24 years, and then I took over after him, basically. So confirmation is like a part of my heart, but I would say confirmation programming is not. Confirmation as like a journey and what it could be is absolutely something that I advocate for, but I think that we need to have an honest conversation about like this the long-standing tradition in the church that this is like a rite of passage where young people confirm their faith when they're literally just like figuring out what faith means to begin with. Like, what are we confirming? I can't confirm my faith right now, and I'm a pastor, y'all. Like, so what are we confirming really? And does it work for today's youth and today's world? And does it really even like serve the purpose we suppose it does for the church itself either? And like for so long, confirmation has been treated as this pathway to church membership, like Debbie was talking about earlier, which is so conflicting because we all say that we want young people to be a part of the church. We want them to feel included and welcome. But then we turn right around and then say, but don't forget about these hoops you got to jump through for you to fully belong. And it's really conflicting. It's like we're sending like these mixed messages. You're a part of this family, but not really until you finish this process. And I just feel like if we really believe in a radical welcome, then like, why are we making young people earn their place just because they turn 12 or 13 or 14 or whatever it is? And the elephant in the room of this conversation is that so many young people disappear from the church after confirmation, which tells us that they weren't a part of the process because they wanted to begin with. They did it because they were told to. And is that really like what our faith is about? Is that really what we want the journey of faith for these young people to be about? And so it's kind of no wonder why they leave the church when they move after confirmation, because what we've taught them about church is that it is about jumping through hoops, that it is about memorizing certain things. And so rather than giving them a transformative experience, we're giving them a bureaucratic one. And let's be real, we don't want that faith experience as adults. We don't want to sit through a confirmation program. We don't want to be in a church that's about memorizing doctrine or checking off the right theological boxes. We don't want faith to feel like a school assignment. We want something real too, something that speaks to us, something that connects us to God, to each other, and the world in meaningful ways. So if we as adults don't want that type of faith that's rigid and about obligation, why are we forcing young people to experience that? If we really want young people to stay engaged with the church, we have to stop treating, if we're going to have confirmation, we have to stop treating it like a requirement and start treating it like an invitation, like a journey that doesn't end with a graduation, a journey that continues on, and an opportunity to experience church as a place of curiosity and real conversations about faith, not about doctrine and about, I mean, creeds are fun to learn about, but that's because I'm a nerd. Like, look at me. Of course it's cool to me, but it's not cool to everybody. And like, it's cool to learn about, but it's not cool to memorize. And it's, the truth is that if we want confirmation to matter, I'll close, like it has to mean something. It has to mean something more. Like how much more information do we need? How much more data do we need? That standardized testing does not work. If it doesn't work in schools, it doesn't work in church. So I think that if we're going to keep confirmation going, and it's fair if we want to keep confirmation going, it just has to become something different. It just does. Something that is about the journey and true transformation, and not about checking off any boxes or making sure that I jump through the same hoops my mom and my dad did because we're supposed to. So, and let the church say.
Amen. All right. Thank you to our three panelists and presenters for giving us a lot to think about in a very short amount of time. So what we would like to do at this point is have your smaller groups from that space kind of reflect if there was anything big that bubbled up within, or common themes, things that came up in your small groups that you would like to share out with the wider group.
Uriah, do you want to say anything about your thoughts, like the fact that the question box caught your attention when Kelsey was talking about that?
Listen, Lisa. Goodness
What?
gracious.
Sorry, I took notes.
No, I really appreciated Reverend Kelsey's question box. So my role, I'm Reverend Uriah Williams. I serve the Damascus Project as a registrar. It's where the Regional Theological Education Ministry of the Minnesota and Wisconsin conferences. It's a mouthful. But so I serve as the registrar, and I'm their first ever online confirmation teacher, serving for the Minnesota and Wisconsin conferences. And so I really appreciated Kelsey's question box, because like I give opportunity at the end of each class session for my confirmands, if they have any questions, to lift them up. But there is something to the anonymity of the question box that I don't think that I've quite gotten there. You know, and like I have that trust in my students, I think, because like they will email me questions outside of it, and then we'll talk about it when we get into our Zoom sessions. But now I'm like thinking, well, it's easy to put up a Google form at the end of everything, and then just not, you know. So thank you. That's something that we'll probably add in at least for next year's program, if not the last couple of months of this year's.
That just struck me when we were talking, because I thought that is something that I think would increase the relevance for youth and adults that are participating in confirmation, to have a place where they felt like they could ask questions without putting themselves on the spot. I mean, I think a lot of times people just don't ask because they don't want to be embarrassed by not knowing something.
Well, like case in point, right, was I was using BCE and CE for my date times, and one of my confirmands felt courageous enough, right, to like email me afterwards saying, "Hey, what is this?" And I just hadn't even thought about it, because since I've been going to higher education, that's what we use. But she was still used to AD and BC, so and you know the little question box would have been a great space for that.
Um, a lot of the panelists I also like agree with, especially like the graduation 8th grade and then poof, they're gone. And one of the harder things for me have been reinstigating like sponsorship or mentorship and getting people to do that. So this year I changed it to all 3 years. We do confirmation through 6th through 8th, and maybe 6th grade is just learning about other adults, and 7th grade is hopefully maybe we have one, and then 8th grade is maybe I keep that sponsor or maybe I switch. And that way it's sort of not this try to force a relationship in the last year and have it be awkward, especially for new members that come to the church that maybe even their parents don't have a connection with another adult member. And so I've tried to like make these little events that I say casually forced these, not the relationship, but the ways of meeting adult members. And so in youth group, I have intergenerational days of, like I said, making bread or like making homemade jam. And then I've made this event sort of in December, and I called it the sponsors dinner. And it's sort of like this big dinner with the confirmands and a bunch of potential sponsors. And then after dinner, the table split up, and then they sort of do this speed dating thing. And I even give them a sheet that's like they rate whoever they're talking to. And they have like 3 or 5 minutes with each adult. And that way at the end, I collect the sheets and I'm able to recommend to their parents, hey, you know, Julie liked XYZ, you know, this is a little bit about that person. I think even down the line, I might have like little profiles for each adult that sort of says a little bit about them, maybe how long they've been a member, maybe their interests or what they did at their age. And that helped a lot with at least getting the kids to know others, and at least getting some youth to have some sponsors, rather than, I feel like last year was really, really like pushing, and then it became January, and I'm like, what's the point of a sponsor for the last, 3 months of these? So that's helped with. It's like it's like re-educating, especially after COVID, the congregation about the habits, and I know some of the habits also just need to be dropped. And and also like just trying to have the church provide opportunities for these relationships to happen rather than everybody sort of supposed to be doing it on their own has helped. That's all. Thanks.
Something that came up in our group was the value of involving youth in the life of the church, and making sure Carmen Lawler said, giving young people jobs and a place, and making sure that they know that they are part of the body and life of the church. And I really loved that wording.
I was also thinking, with all three panelists, the idea of what's relevant and kind of the memorization and the, focusing on learning the facts or whatever is sometimes I think kind of kills confirmation. And I realized that when I'm in a different position because I don't teach confirmation, but I do get the kids from across the Wisconsin Conference and beyond who come to one of our 3 confirmation retreats that the conference sponsors. And it's always interesting because we have kids who come in who do not want to be there. They're there because they have to be there because it's part of their confirmation requirements, and they're not excited about confirmation. And almost across the board, the kids leave that weekend excited about what they did while they were there. And I was thinking, well, what's different about it? And I realized we don't focus on trying to teach what a lot of our confirmation curriculums do. We're actually focused on giving them an opportunity to create an experience. And so as I was thinking about that, I thought that does say something about what it might do to our confirmation approach if that was what we tried doing in our local churches as well, giving them an experience where they can grow and explore their faith, and then make a decision later on in that process. And maybe it's an ongoing process so that, there are different checkpoints where you find out if a kid's feels ready or has a desire to confirm their faith. And if not, they can continue on in the process if they want, and you check in again later. I don't know, just seems like that might be something we could try.
I have a personal experience to share in regards to one of my own children who went through confirmation and at the end said, from a faith perspective, I quote unquote can't confirm or affirm all of those things that you're asking me to believe, but I would like to join the church and be an active member in the congregation. And the harmful piece of that was that the answer was no in that situation. And yet in in a congregation we have adults, we don't ask them to, we ask them to be in covenant with the congregation, but we don't ask them to affirm what they believe. And so that was a really heartbreaking experience in that, like, choose to be confirmed, choose to be a member, but you have to be confirmed before you could be a member. It was like, so that connection piece was like kind of like Jonathan was saying, well, what's the relevance in that, or Kelsey mentioned, a lot of Christians aren't acting very Christian. Well, that doesn't feel like I belong, and now I have a kiddo that won't go to that church anymore. So that's a really hard thing about this, like, check the boxes and even calling it a process, right? I do love the idea of the fact that it's asking our young people to be part of a journey. Like Jonathan mentioned, I'm still on a faith journey, right? Like, we all should be. And yet if you have this like specific quote unquote rite of passage, it could look so different to be still on the journey, as opposed to the end of a journey, or a benchmark per se.
And just as an add-on to that is, at least in the Minnesota Conference, most of our congregations do not require confirmation for adults who choose to become members and join the congregation. That is not a question, that's not a requirement that we have of adult members in the way that it is of our young people. And even posing the question at a really formative place where most of them are not going to be feel that they can respond to that, pushes them into a place where a community that for many of them has been a place of belonging up to that point is saying, are you in or are you out? In really unhelpful ways, and in ways that we don't require of adults. So I'll just say that there are a number of congregations in Minnesota that have completely decoupled confirmation from the question around church membership at all. And in fact, many of them have started to say, actually, our children, even much younger, are already full members of the congregation. And they've handled how do we do voting, how do we do other things in a variety of ways. But the central question has been, many places are beginning to decouple that.
I want to piggyback on the children are already members. They're already members of the body of Christ. Several years ago, I came across a brain development statistic or whatever fact that that between the ages of 2 and 6 or 7, the brain's at a state where everything goes in. It's plastic. Everything goes in, good, bad, ugly, and it remains in the amygdala, which is not connected to your speech center in the brain, but it's still a memory kind of thing, such that when you're an adult, I think the figure was something crazy like 90% of your subconscious adult choices, not, back there, are based on what went in between 2 and 7. And if you think about what we're doing in the church with our 2 to 7-year-olds, oftentimes, here, go to Sunday school, away from the important work of the church, away from the other adults, then it makes perfect sense to me that when we say at confirmation or after, when they're confirmed, okay, now you can come in and be part of the life of our church. And so it makes sense to me when a kid will say, physically or verbally, this means nothing to me. I really don't have any desire to be here to do that. So all that's to say, going back to the children who are already members with us, what if we started thinking about confirmation at birth, at baptism? Oh, what a concept. And then work toward, work toward what we want them to be at our whatever confirmation age. Anyway, I just tossed that out there as something to mull over. I've been mulling it over for 10 years. So.
Well, and to go off that too, Debbie, like I think too, part of it is that there's this real stigma right now against our younger generations of like, oh, they're too apathetic, or they don't care about their faith. And like, I don't know, man, like that has not been my experience. Like that just seems like they care so deeply about their faith, and that's why they're interrogating it so much. Where like some of the elder generations might view that as disrespect. But it's that they're looking for that meaning and that truth. So to just like open up, we're in our theology section now, to just open up talks about like, well, what does it mean for an all-powerful God and all-good God to allow the Holocaust to happen? Like they had some wonderful like banter back and forth on that last month. So like, I don't know. I just feel like that idea of separating the children from the main event of the church. It's just not, I don't know. It's like, how do you cut off your hand and still use it, you know? So I appreciate you lifting that up, Debbie.
One thing I've talked about with you through confirmation, when we've done the rite of confirmation, is that it's about them choosing, do they want to keep being a part of this faith body? Do they want to keep exploring and keep asking questions? You know, we talk about how they were baptized and now they get to make a choice. Do they want to keep engaging in this community? And I've thought that was a really beautiful way to approach like keeping that rite of confirmation, is that it gives them autonomy, um, and uh, and they get to make that choice for themselves. Are they still curious about this? Do they still want to lean in, or are they not sure? And they have full permission. I tell them at the very first session, you have full permission to say no at the end of this. But yeah, I found that giving them that autonomy is a really useful thing if you want to keep the right.
That permission piece is so hard in a lot of spaces, though, because the youth leader or whoever it is in the context is fully like I think we're all on board with like, if you want to say no, please say no, but that doesn't necessarily translate to their parents. And the expectations. And a big part of this conversation is that this is really, for a lot of them, their first experience into gaslighting and manipulation and coercion, and it's coming from their faith system. Because not everybody at that age, not everybody at this age, our age, is comfortable enough resisting. And so they're saying yes because they're afraid to say no. And it's a really unfortunate aspect to this conversation.
I've framed it for both youth and for their parents, sometimes around I've used marriage as an example. We talk about what confirmation is, like when they're making those promises, you know, what are the promises they're making and who are they making them to? And then and I've usually start with the kids, I start talking about the promises made in a marriage and what it would mean if they were at a wedding and they witnessed that, and then at the end of the night saw the bride or the groom or the brides and grooms, whichever, go home with someone else. And they're like, oh, that'd be horrible. And I'm like, well, why? And they're like, well, because they made promises. And, you know, in most cases, these kids are thinking of a church wedding where they've made promises in front of witnesses to God and to each other. And I said, well, what do you think you're doing when you make the decision to be confirmed? And so when you make a decision to be confirmed, but then immediately you're never seen again, you've made promises that you weren't serious about keeping. And with parents, then I've talked about the marriage thing, but I've talked to them about, well, you know, could you imagine, you know, telling your child, you have to marry this person. I've picked them for you. You are going to do this. And they're like, well, no, my kids, you know, will be able to pick their spouse. And I'm like, well, you know, with faith, they should also be able to make a decision about that faith that, you know, parents got that choice when they had their child baptized. That was where they had that role. And that when it comes to confirmation, it is that autonomy piece that Kelsey was talking about, where it's the kid's decision now. And that we can be supportive. And I think too, if we're supportive, the likelihood if someone says no, that they might at some point change, you know, get to a point where they say yes, is going to be a stronger likelihood if they were supported in that no. If they're not supported in the no, it's not going to end well, I guess, for them. That's because it'll just build a higher, you know, it'll put up a wall or whatever.
So we are at the 8 o'clock mark, and Lisa does have a benediction to share with all of us. What I do want to take like one more minute, I started prompting it in the chat because we were still talking and going, but the piece of the conversation is what's next. Does holding another conversation like this on Zoom make sense? Is it like, what are your ideas for how do we, keep this going and continue to be talking about what it might look like to reframe and revise what we're doing for confirmation?
And to support each other in that.
I think yes. And particularly as we are facing the issues of the day, certainly climate and how we address that in a confirmation experience or in any part of the church life that impacts everyone. The kids have a stake in what's going on big time. Yeah. How we go about doing that would be a helpful conversation too.
I would love another Zoom discussion as well. Also, Jen, I just realized where I recognize your name from. Jen runs a cohort space on the Damascus Project Network, the Faith Formation and Youth Ministry leaders. So that'd be a great space, I think, for most people in here to join. Jen, I can't believe that I've been working here almost a year. We've never actually been in a Zoom call together. So.
And I think several of the people on here are active in that group. So that's been fun to see people's faces. So
I would love another Zoom discussion though. That'd be great.
NOWCYM could definitely work on putting a part 2 together. Awesome.
Other thoughts? I don't want to rush anyone.
This has been wonderful. I think the conversation tonight.
I just love hearing what people are doing or what they want to do. Let me leave you with this benediction. I recognize that the work that you're all engaged in is not easy work. And sometimes it might feel like you're out there on your own doing it. So I offer you these words. May the grace that says you are not alone encourage you. May the mercy that says you are enough comfort you. May the love that says you are loved embrace you this day and every day. And may the Holy Spirit equip and empower you to share this good news with everyone you meet. Amen.